Dave Lorenzoni.
Good morning, good afternoon, and possibly even good evening to all the attendees, and thanks for attending today's discussion of the ROI of XML. Now, I'm sure my name is David Lorenzoni. I'm with Single Sourcing, and I'm sure you're here today because you've possibly heard all the buzz about XML, and that's probably why you're interested in learning more about the ROI. Maybe you're just curious. Maybe you're even considering an XML solution as a way to address your content requirements, or maybe you have to pitch this to senior management and are looking for some real business benefits. But whatever your reason for attending today, I can assure you you're in the right place, because today we're going to be talking with 4 industry leaders who've actually implemented XML solutions and have been through the trials and now experience the true benefits of their XML investments. We're recording today's session, and we'll make it available to all attendees at the conclusion or within the next day or so. So sit back, listen, prepare your questions, and get ready for an excellent time. Now, our expert panelists today represent a diverse group of industries, and I'd like to take a few moments to introduce them to you. Today we have Greg Johnson from Medtronics. Greg is currently the MAPS Program Manager at Medtronics, one of the world's largest independent medical technology companies. Greg has over 40 years experience in management and in technical publishing departments. He holds a BA in philosophy and German. Greg, thanks for joining us today, and if there's anything you'd like to briefly add or give the audience an idea of what they should take away, please let them know.
Yeah, I guess my comment to add to that, David, is that we do a lot of advising of people who are getting into this arena as partly as a payback to the industry for some people at Caterpillar and J.D. Edwards who were very helpful to us. So that's kind of a wrinkle for me.
Great. Thank you, Greg. We also joining us today is Todd Nolan. Todd Nolan's with a large telecommunications company. He's presently the IT project manager responsible for maintaining and supporting the documentation and training content management systems. He has over 16 years experience with the methods and tool sets associated with structured authoring, XML authoring, and content management. Todd, thank you for participating as well. Is there anything in particular you want the audience to know about what they should take away from today's session?
Thanks, David. I think the one key takeaway I'd like the audience to get is first of all an understanding of that there is an effort that has to go into this, and when it comes to rolling out XML, and that can be quite a significant effort, but the payback is enormous. And I think I guess that's kind of the topic of today, is to really talk more about that. The effort that goes in is all going to be well worth it. And anyway, sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation, I think.
Great. Thank you. We're also joined by Andrew Piper of Toro. Andy is the team lead of the instructional communications team at the Toro company. He has over 20 years experience in technical communication, and he holds a Bachelor of Science in English Technical Communications. Andy, thanks for participating as well. Is there anything in particular that you want to make sure that the audience takes away from today's presentation?
Well, other than just parodying what Todd already said, which was a very good point, just that you don't need to get started in this, you don't need to be a programmer or a total computer genius. We started it with just our writing team and myself being a tech writer, and one can learn on the fly and hire the people you do need to do it. So don't be afraid of the technology just because it is technology.
Great. That's a very good point, and thank you. We're also joined by Charlotte Rubidoux from Hewlett-Packard. Dr. Rubidoux is a business consultant at HP and has over 17 years experience in technical communications. At HP, she oversees the single sourcing strategy and implementation for the enterprise storage, server, and networking division. Dr. Rubidoux is the author of numerous articles on single sourcing and collaboration, and is co-editor of Collaborative Writing in the Virtual Workplaces. Charlotte, thank you for participating as well. Is there anything in particular that you want the audience to take away from today?
Sure. So in addition to the suggestions provided by the other panelists here, I've found in my experience that collaboration is extremely important in making single sourcing work, because content is shared, and if people don't know how to coordinate their activities, you can experience many challenges. And in that process, you need to, when collaborating with people, have good relationships, good rapport, and really have a lot of fun. I always try to leave that as my mantra for the day, that I'm always going to do everything I can to have as much fun as I can. So I'm hoping that you guys can help me do that today in this hour.
Well, I think we will, and as a matter of fact, that's a perfect lead-in for our next session. You know, when there's something that has as much buzz as XML, there's always a list of real and, well, let's just say maybe not so real benefits. You might hear all the hype. With that in mind, we created Dave's top 10 reasons to go to XML. Now, I apologize, I don't have Paul and the band in the background to help me out with this, but bear with me. We decided to create a list that'll give you an idea and have a little bit of fun with this as well, because these are some things that maybe you've heard. Number 10, XM what? Well, it sounds cool. Maybe it's radio. Number 9, it's related to the X Games, Extreme, and man, it makes me cool with my kids. Number 8, the number 8 reason to go to XML. It's a new 3-letter acronym that your friends won't know much about. Number 7, it looked good on my resume. Number 6, so I can go home on time. Number 5, my boss decided to do it. Number 4 reason for going to XML, to keep up with the marketing changes as marketing makes changes to the product names.
That one's too true.
Good comment. Number 3, my team keeps getting smaller and they keep dumping more stuff on me.
It works for me.
All of us.
Number 2, because I need more conference swag. Who doesn't? And the number 1 reason from Dave's top 10 list to go to XML, I want the money they save to go to my vacation fund. Well, I don't have the band, as I said, but I hope you enjoyed that, and there's some truth in some of that, right? How can we help you improve in your environment? But those of us who work in XML, we typically hear about typical savings that you'll run into in XML, and a few of those areas include translations, reduced time to produce outputs, content reuse, reduced errors, and maybe even non-proprietary data. Well, how does that all figure into ROI? And how does that measure? How can we measure that? So let's start at least with the number 1 discussed topic first, translations. Andy, we hear quite a lot about translation savings. Can you tell us how the Toro company saved when they moved to XML as you needed to globalize your products?
Sure. We really went into XML because of the translation issue, also the reuse as well, but the reuse is merely something we want to attain to get higher translation hit rates. When we decided to go, when we actually implemented our XML strategy, just going to XML without the content management system, we saw a fairly major increase, major ROI right away, because with XML, you no longer have typesetting requirements as the XML comes back and the style sheets typeset it for you. So we were able to literally eliminate a whole process, and which we were having outsourced by someone else, and it cut our translations budget down significantly. What we weren't really expecting was the speed at which XML would add into it. We have noticed that we have a 25% increase in the number of translations that we are able to complete each year. We used to have translations used to take a couple weeks to through the translator and back to us. Now they're taking 2 to 5 days to get through the translator because the XML is so fast. We have a content management system set up that automatically sends the English book onto the translator as soon as the writer's done with it. And so it's freed up the writers because they don't have to go monkey around with sending the book, waiting for it to come back. The system handles all of that now. We really haven't saved any money at Toro on translations at all. What we've done is the translation budget stayed the same, but what we did is we expanded our translation offerings from 11 languages up to 27 language capability in the XML, allowing the marketing managers to choose what languages they want, what countries they want to go into, and opened up whole new markets for us. For instance, we never used to really go into Eastern Europe other than Poland, and now Toro is being able to go into almost all the Eastern European countries, including Russia, which we never had before, and also some of the Asiatic countries like Japan, which we had a minor presence in before, but the translations were so laborious and so expensive we could never really do much. Now we regularly go into both Japan and Korea and China, and all of this is because of what the XML has saved us and the reduction in cost. A couple other metrics. We have seen a 25% reduction in the average cost per set of translations needed for each model, and a 37% reduction of the average single language translation overall once we went to XML. And really there's a couple things that are driving that. One is there's a higher hit rate that we're getting now because the writers are reusing the data more efficiently, and so therefore if they reuse the English, it goes up against the Trados database and doesn't need to be retranslated. So there's less to translate with every book that we write. Furthermore, it's just more efficient. So
those are some really incredible numbers. But what if you don't translate content? You're just serving the domestic market. Would you still see an ROI? And if so, where and why? Todd, any input on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. With regard to XML and deploying our systems, our business case was built largely without any translations included, and the ROI focused more on the single sourcing and reuse aspects of the ability to use XML. The challenge and vision we had, at the time was for us to address getting content to our customers easier, especially web-based documentation. It gets a better delivery channel agility, being able to implement more robust taxonomy, metadata on our content, enabling end-to-end life cycle management, and last but not least, and this was a significant factor in our business cases, were to reduce the similar processes and decommission the redundant systems. Just to give you a bit of a context on that aspect of our business, is that we're a large telecom equipment provider that was bringing together a number of business units. So we had a number of varying processes, tools, technologies for authoring and delivering content to our customers. So we're coming to a point where we needed to merge, and we were seeing synergies and the same processes going on. And the logical next step was to bring single sourcing to the table, and of course reuse as well, because we had products that were being shared across other products. So we had a commingling of technologies and product information that needed to be simplified into one process. By doing that, we were able to really claim a lot of savings. So focusing on the single sourcing and reuse of content was a big factor in ROI. Also, because we had all these organizations and business coming together, that gave us an ability to put together a single governance and process around how we manage change. So having that consistent life cycle and that consistent tool set, bringing together processes and having standing committees and governance committees to discuss what changes needed to be made. That drove a lot of efficiencies and saved on having multiple tools, multiple processes going on across the corporation.
Wow.
The driving of it, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, actually, and the savings were from a quantifying perspective were difficult because they were so significant, and because we saw them not only being saved just in tools and technology internally, but we saw, for example, with just one example would be our outsourcing of tech writing to other organizations outside the company.
Wow.
Having a single system, having a single process, and having globally all the different business units use that single process allowed us to be more flexible and actually leverage and increase our outsourcing.
Okay.
Todd, I have I'm sorry. This is Janice. I have a question from the audience for Todd. They're curious as to what percentage of your content is reusable and how much content was converted to XML?
So in terms of, I'll take the second question first. The volume of content that was converted to XML was approximately 500,000 pages. And the first question, can you repeat the first question again?
Percentage of your content is reusable?
Yeah, percentage was probably around the 25% range. Now, logically, everything could be reused. The way we set up our content, our DTDs, it was very a topic-oriented structure. It was a proprietary DTD that was largely based on early versions of DITA. But so we could reuse essentially any module or topic within the suite of information. But in reality, just driven by how much reuse needed to be happening across the different products, we had about a 25% reuse capability.
Great. Now, I mean, that's interesting. We've covered a couple topics. We've covered translations and reuse and streamlining business processes. But one of the questions I'm often asked by customers and people interested in XML is just how do you get started with XML? Are there benefits that can be attained before implementation? Charlotte, can you describe what your team did to prepare for the transition to XML? And did that help and provide any benefits?
Yes, certainly. The funny thing is, we're a pretty big high-tech company, and sometimes the cobbler's children have no shoes, right? Well, the employees at HP sometimes have trouble getting equipment, and we really wanted to get a content management system, but got a lot of pushback and uncertainty about it. But we knew from what the industry was saying that it was very important for us to actually do something to go in that direction, that we'd be missing the boat if we didn't. So what I found, and I think the audience will as well, is that we achieved results before we even went into a CMS. That is, we knew we didn't have the CMS, but at some point we were going to have the tool, and we had to prepare to get in the tool. We needed to streamline our content, to restructure the content so there was uniformity from one deliverable to the next in terms of how we wrote certain types of content or topics. And in the process of doing that, we could see that there was so much repeated information that we weren't aware of. So we learned that writers were so close to their work and working at such a fine level of detail that sometimes they couldn't even get a perspective across their document set unless we had them carry out activities that allowed them to view their content from one deliverable to the next. We saw an incredible amount of redundancy, and so we were able to reduce a lot of pages, streamline text, reduce text, use minimalist principles, and we saw improvements just by doing that with localization before we ever got, and our English management, before we ever even got into a CMS. In fact, we showed a 30% reduction in costs as we were starting to increase the number of projects just by reorganizing and restructuring our content.
That's amazing in itself. Just preparing for XML or making the initial transition helped you reduce content and a 30% reduction.
Yep, and then we were ready, we were poised when it came time to use the system to be able to convert our documents, because they were all, we were able to map our FrameMaker files into XML and then load them into the CMS without having to load non-essential content.
Excuse
Garbage
me.
in, garbage out, as you know.
Exactly. This is Janice.
Right.
I have a question from the audience. What roughly would be the time to convert flat content to CMS-ready content?
So we started our restructuring at the 2002, 2003, and then we started, by the time we got approval to implement and purchase a CMS, we were able to get our content into the CMS by 2004. So it was a little over a year to undergo that process. We may have been able to do it slightly quicker if we had the system. We could have restructured and constantly had a constant flow of migration into the CMS. But the next stage of effort was and has been breaking up the documents, the deliverables, into topics, and that has been a very long process, and largely because it's a real change in mindset for writers. So 2004 is when we started loading all our content. We've got that all in probably by 2005, and then we were working on strategies for managing modular content, and recently we've reorganized, and we have teams that are still in the process of creating topics and modules. So it's not a quick fix by any stretch, but you still can see results even if you're still working at it.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. That was very interesting and very helpful for me and for hoping the audience. We often hear about moving to XML. At least it is a good reason because it's non-proprietary, right? It's open, but quantifying that or trying to understand how that can help a company meet objectives, both short-term and long-term. I'd like to discuss that, Greg. Can you shed some light on what you've encountered in that area?
Sure, I can speak to that. I think when we start to look at the value of being open or non-proprietary, the most immediate and obvious aspect is that open source is free. But I think that upfront investment typically comes with customization requirements, and so I don't think that's where the big win is. But I do look at, and we certainly in our project have looked at vendors who are standards-based. And so rather than working with vendors who are building proprietary products that lock you into their products and don't have an exit strategy, those of us who have lived through decades of being locked into proprietary solutions and then having to basically abandon our previous data to move into the brave new world of better products that come in the next generation. We're really tired of that, and so we architected our system to reflect really a focus on the lifetime cost of ownership, and that is trying to future-proof, if you will, at least the data and markup that's in the repository, so that you're still always going to be replacing components of the system, the processor. You might replace your composition engine, you might replace your XML editor, you might replace any component in the system. But our goal was to have the impact of that be only on the tools development team, not on the users, and to have no negative impact on the repository content itself, so that we could really look at building for the future and keeping all this content around for decades to come was our goal. And I think that shows up in the ROI more in terms of this cost of lifetime ownership, that you don't get 6 or 8 or 10 years into this and then have basically your entire investment obsoleted by new technologies that have come out. You're able to keep moving, and because, for example, we've had vendors go out of business. And because they were standards-based, we just went and chose another standards-based vendor. And so we've outlived about 3 generations of vendors during the time we've been doing this project. And I think that's one way to think about it, to protect your investment for the future.
That's interesting. It's not just an investment in the short-term product, but the entire environment and your content in particular.
what really all three of the previous speakers said. I think you have to look at what your need is, to architect your system solution. In our case, we certainly saw the benefit on the authoring side in terms of we were involved in movements like writing for translatability and the minimalization movement, and so we went through an entire exercise to standardize our content, reduce our content as much as we could, and really write for reuse, which is Charlotte.
Very good.
The difference. Yeah, that's a very different effort. So we saw lots of return on investment on the authoring side, but in our particular situation, we were supporting, at that time, 10 languages. Now we support 20, and we're on the path to support 30. So as our translation center in Europe is fond of saying, whatever, if you have to spend an extra $1 on the authoring side to save us $1 per language, that's a great return on investment. And so that was the notion we took into this. We saw return on investment on the authoring side in cost, cycle time, and quality.
Wow.
But the huge win was on the translation side. The real bucks were on the translation side for huge return on investment. It was about linear to the number of.
That's great. Janice, I want to pause for a second to see if we have any questions from the audience.
Yes, I do actually. I have a couple questions, and I'm not sure, this could be to any one of the panelists, is how do you calculate how much of your XML content is reused?
I'll take a stab at that. This is Todd. I answered the last question on reuse. The calculations that I've used, there's different ways and you can look at it, because we had reuse at various levels. We had reuse within a documentation suite, for example, so across documents that are related to some component of a product, and you have the reuse going on of those topics across, say, different releases of the same product. And then we had also reuse between different products and different releases. So we had reuse across all of those levels. The metric, the 25%, is a metric that takes all of those reuse areas into account. So again, it really depends on the level of reuse. You really need to drive into your content. You don't want to obviously drive too much reuse where you don't need it. But what we did was we focused on reusing content where it made the most sense to eliminate duplication of effort, obviously.
We've seen it in two places. Number one, we've been using a Trados database for our translations for years. Our translator has Trados and World Server. And when we went to XML, we saw and got a content management system, started really reusing the data. We saw a change in our hit rate there from about 60 to 70% up to 80 to 99% hit rate on the average book. So in order to have changes that take place and you're getting in the 90s for hit rate, that means that the writers are obviously reusing data that other writers have already written and already had translated. So that's one spot where we look. The other spot is in our content management system itself. We can take a look at what see where to use data and run some reports like that on what objects are being used across platforms and stuff. We haven't quite developed that kind of metric fully yet, but we're getting there.
Hi.
This is Greg. I can answer for Medtronic. We have always had a very rigorous discipline around measuring this. Our formula for measuring it is we do both modules at the module level and at the word level. Word level because that's the lowest common denominator in the translation industry. So what we first measure is, I get an automated report very regularly on this, how many modules are included in all the deliverables, and then of those modules, how many are unique. So that by looking at that formula, it gives us a percentage of the unique ones are non-reuse, and all the ones that are not unique then come from reusing any of the unique modules. And we've typically started out, when we have new document types going into the system, we might start out on the first couple or three at maybe 50%. But over time, as we add volume into the system, more of that document type, say more implant manuals or more reference manuals, that document type, in all cases, all our document types now are exceeding 90% of the content is from reuse. Then the next step in the sequence is that goes to our translation agency, but we only have to bundle the 10% that's unique for our translation cycle. And they turn around and use translation memory then on the 10%, and they're achieving the same kinds of hit rates of above 90% on that 10%. So you have the 90% from reuse out of the content management system, and then 90% of the remaining segments from reuse out of the translation memory. And we've reduced our demand for new translations to 1% of all our deliverable content.
Wow, those are incredible. And so I heard Charlotte in the background. I want to make sure she had a moment to jump in.
Sure. So I'll go back to the if you don't have a tool, and the tool can definitely, when you're in the tool, give you some data. But one of the things we resorted to along the lines of what Greg was talking about with regard to reusable topics versus unique topics, we created a spreadsheet, a content mapping spreadsheet that would allow us to view our deliverables across the project set and analyze them, determine where there was shared information, where rewriting needed to occur so you could share that information where it would be identical and could become modular, and then where there was unique information, and then the spreadsheet would tally up that analysis so that you could project how much you think you would be saving when you would get into the system. And we've seen, a range that can go from 60% up to 90%. It depends on the type of product, whether it's hardware or software, and the complexity of the product, and if they are product solutions which actually combine a series of products into one and might require some specialization of that information or customization.
This is Todd. I'd like to completely say that this is exactly the way we did it here too. So that was a very good description, Charlotte.
Great.
Using spreadsheets, task breakdowns, looking at the content, figuring it out. Having a CMS tool also, having your content in a CMS right to start gives you that ability to be able to do that kind of analysis too that Charlotte was talking about much more simply. And also from a metrics standpoint gives you that ability to leverage the tool to generate metrics. Just a comment on that.
And it sounded like because of the way you could break XML down into more granular components, whether it's at the word level that Greg mentioned or various topics that you've talked about, Todd, you can do more of that analysis, similar to what a company would do for product or parts and so forth, to know how it's being used or where being used. Now,
absolutely.
Charlotte, one of the things you mentioned earlier was is the impact on quality of the final product. And I know one of the metrics or benefits that is often touted with XML is reduced errors. Did you see any benefit from error reduction or quality improvements?
Absolutely. The whole process, the whole manual process of going through and saying, what do I have here, really? Analyzing it, finding out where there are redundancies, where there are inconsistencies, allows you to get a handle on it so that you can write it once and reuse it. And because we do that, we don't have this problem where one manual says X, the other says Y, and the customer's not sure what they're supposed to do. So the ability to maintain consistency and very efficient language that doesn't ramble and prevent users from getting to the point allows for much greater usability and access to content. So we feel that this work has really helped improve the quality and consistency of information.
I
Great.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Certainly.
Sure.
At Toro, we really, this is huge for us because we had basically each of our writers kind of worked in isolation prior to XML, and they didn't really share a lot. And the manuals were, I mean, the names of chapters would be different. The orders of what information came in what order throughout the books could be different. Whether they included certain sections or not could be different from one product line to the next. It all depended on kind of the individual author. When we went to XML, we really decided to use it to get a control of our content. And our DTDs, which are very semantic DTDs, which each chapter is set out, everything's set in order. And so every Toro manual now, no matter what you get, if you want to find the engines, something about the engine, it's going to be in the same spot of every manual that we produce at this point in time, because the DTD is controlling where in the manual that occurs. And so the writers at first were kind of felt a little constrained, but now they actually love it because they don't have to worry about what the headings say for the chapters. It's all pre-done. It's all generated. Furthermore, we have like a big maintenance chart in our books. Well, and the writers used to have to go and put like the maintenance intervals in each maintenance section where you would talk about a procedure and then create this chart. Well, with XSL, we were able to actually put in the XML content throughout the whole book and put the data in the actual procedures and have the style sheets collect all that data and build the maintenance charts and the loose parts charts in setup and the troubleshooting chart, so that the writers don't have to be entering data in more than one place anymore. So it's always right, because we used to always have this issue where it was wrong in one place and right in the other, and it was a big mess. And with the XML, we've got that. We just take that for granted now, and I don't even think about it until you ask like a question like this.
So you've attained a level of automation that wasn't
exactly.
possible
The writers don't have to try to go to different places throughout the books to add the same values anymore. They just put them in the place where it makes the most sense, and the system grabs the data and moves it to where it needs it to be for actual final publication. And that can be different depending on whether it's published in the book or on a web presentation.
Wow. Wow. Janice, I believe you said you may have had another question?
Yeah, I do. I have another question. So from a staffing perspective and management, when you go to content management, what type of support is required by like an IT department when you implement content management? And that could be for anyone in the panel.
A lot.
Yeah.
It's a bad answer. We had some issues with that. Our IS department had some issues right off the bat, really understanding our needs and what the publishing needs were from a content management perspective. And it wasn't until the last few years that we found some programmers who we brought in-house and were able to meet those needs. And from a content management perspective, it's a little heavier. You do need to have some programmers who can make the authoring environment and the content management system kind of sing together. I'm a firm believer that there really is no out-of-box solution when it comes to getting a content management system up and running. That said, it's not onerous either. I'll let someone else talk.
Yeah, and Andrew, what Andrew said is kind of similar to my experience, but we were fortunate to have IT staff that were really knowledgeable and understanding of the business requirements. At the same time, we had fortunate that we had people in the business themselves, myself included, that understood the problems and the solutions we were trying to put forward with the CMS. So we worked really well together with IT. We always had our challenges. Different organizations have different challenges and the different processes and approvals and all that to have to go through. Actually, my title says IT project manager. I wasn't in IT when our project began, so I ended up being there. So I joined the dark side, so to speak. I think the there was a lot of different pieces from an infrastructure standpoint that had to be put in place by IT. Database support, the server infrastructure support. A lot of that is for us is outsourced to a different IT company. But so obviously you get very good and familiar with all the different processes and tools and ticket systems you have to get going to get all the different components in place. Making sure that's running in concurrency with all the different tools. Great,
great. I have a question for the general group. How long, and Greg, let's start with you, since I'm not picking on you, but how long have you been implementing XML solutions at Medtronics?
Well, long enough that when we first looked at this, we ended up choosing SGML because XML was too immature, didn't support indexing, and it was designed for web delivery, and so we had FDA requirements for print deliverables. Is to this day is still our primary world. We do electronic delivery as well, but so we started in the late 90s doing our research and architecting the system. But we've been doing it long enough that we started in SGML, and then as XML matured, we made a transition and to all our tools into an XML environment.
Did you see results immediately, or how long did it take? And I'd like to get the input from everyone as well on this. Just not picking
ours was not immediate. Mostly because we are, being a regulated industry, we have very, very tight controls on our development and doc planning, and there's just such tight restrictions that everything had to be architected, designed, signed off, documented in advance before we could execute, and then it had to all be testable to those requirements. This is all subject to FDA audit, and so it took us longer than it would have had I still been in the high-tech industry. But it turned out to be good discipline. I mean, it helped us to do a very structured project, and I would say it was about 3 years before we really started seeing the ROI for us.
It took us about a year to implement XML itself, and after the initial XML implementation, we started seeing returns almost immediately because we were able to get rid of the typesetting phase of our translations, and the writers were able to take that on themselves, and so it wasn't nearly as onerous, and we didn't have to hire external people anymore. As far as content management system goes, we're still in that 1-year phase on the content management system where we're still recouping that ROI in this last year, and but we've definitely recouped it already with the translation portion.
Todd or Charlotte?
So this is Charlotte. As I mentioned, we started to see improvements within the first year before we even got into the system. So we just had a lot of, I think this happens in a lot of organizations where there's this inherited documentation, and it's always been done this way, and that's just how we're doing business. So we inherit the document set, we get new content, and eventually the project, the documentation gets bigger and bigger and bigger as more content comes in. And I would liken it to cleaning my closet, that if I keep buying new things and I don't get rid of others, then it's just going to keep growing, and then managing it becomes a nightmare. So we got.
I hope my wife's on this call.
We got a return on investment right away, and then then we found out, we didn't realize this at the time, that just because we were in XML, we got a reduction, even though we weren't necessarily using modular content. We were getting reductions in translation costs just because we were in XML, and so we're continuing to reap the benefits as we have more teams that are creating projects that are modular and finding ways to reuse content. We have a lot of projects lately that are being called solution documentation, which is the product itself is modular, and it's piecing together products here and there and everywhere. And so the need to have material that's modular that can be repurposed is enormous. So you know, we're not seeing that we've bottomed out by any stretch, and we've been doing this since 2003.
And didn't you recently receive some awards or notoriety within HP for your efforts?
I always like to receive awards for my efforts, and no, Dave, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I thought you were cited recently with an award from HP for some of your content deliverables.
You know what? We have a lot of different teams that are publishing content that have received awards over the years. So, in my group, I don't believe that was the case, but there are a lot of teams doing single sourcing in HP, and it may have been someone else that came past your desk that you heard about.
Possibly.
You might be thinking me. I just got an award at Toro for it yesterday.
Well, that's great. That's perfect timing then. That's what. Yeah. You're the guy I meant, Andrew.
I mentioned it yesterday. So yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Well, I wish I had been the one, Todd. Yeah.
Ours is the way in the past. We won the highest quality award at Medtronic in 2005, and to meet that across a 40,000 person company, you have to. They call it a beauty contest, and you have to keep winning up and up and up to finally win at the Medtronic level. So it was highly visible success.
Wow, that's great, Greg. That's great.
I have sorry, this is Janice. I have questions from the audience, and I'm going to combine these two questions into one, and it's going to be ending up to be a pretty loaded one, and it's for all the panelists. But so a couple people are asking, you know, what tips do you have for someone who's just getting started out and going to XML authoring, and especially like if you're in a smaller organization as well. And then another part to that is, how do you get your writers ready? There you go.
Don't try too much at once. If you're getting into it, don't try to bite off XML and a content management system and all the bells and whistles all at once. Get your XML itself, like find an authoring tool that you like, and get an XML authoring tool and the DTDs, schemas, style sheets, whatever you decide to go with, whether it's DITA or you're going to create your own DTDs or whatever, and get that up and working first, and introduce your writers slowly. You know, that way the writers and yourself and everybody, you don't have to bite off a huge chunk at once. Once you have that working and you've got all your data converted into XML, it's a huge job in and of itself. Then start looking at, okay, how do we take this to the next step? How do we get this into a content management system, or indirect linking, and all the other little bells and whistles that are out there. But just getting yourself into the XML realm would be the way I would chance it. Also, if you're looking into it, look for a tool that allows you to do true XML authoring with DTD control or with data control, content control, as opposed to something that just kind of mimics content control and it really isn't making you be valid to a DTD or style sheet. It's very important to keep those stuff valid for down the line when you do want to get into content management.
And I would agree that you want to do it very slowly. And we've, you know, over time have created a lot of plans where we had certain phases that we worked on. We split up this whole concept into phases. And then we had project plans for various portions of those phases. But really, in my experience, we found that starting with the content is the best place to start. And you can do that without buying any technology. You may want to invest in some courses and some really great text that can help writers and editors and information architects to kind of figure out what the strategy is. But understanding your content model, as described by Ian Rockley, Joanne Hackos, Kurt Ament in Building Modular Documentation, really gives you a great start at getting some continuity across your content so that you can convert it, map it into XML, and go to that next step.
Yeah, and Rockley's book was what started me.
Yeah, Rockley book. You know, and one of the things that I know Greg and I were talking about in other conversations that we've had, the preparation of writers is really one of the most important challenges to consider, especially if you have a writing staff that spans, you know, people who have a long tenure versus people who are just starting out. The fear of change, the idea that I've always worked on my own, I've owned my own documents, I'm proud of the way I do my work, and I know that I can rely on myself. These kinds of assumptions about how you write in a technical environment persist and run so deep, it's really unbelievable. To be able to help the teams of writers understand the changes that they're going to be experiencing and help guide them in ways of working together effectively, collaborating with one another, that their roles are going to change, it is so important. And so Greg allowed us to come in to his environment and see what he was doing so we could get a better feel for what it was like. And I know that other organizations do that, and I think that's a great way to help writers understand. Can have somebody who's actually gone through the process be able to give you some feedback and some lessons learned to help you prepare your staff, because that can be a significant challenge. And you know, I continue to see it, and I'm already doing it. So it's important to remember that piece of it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the hidden costs or the hidden challenges of implementing a new solution. Janice, were there any other questions from the audience?
Not at this time.
Okay, well, I had another question. What benefits did you get that you didn't expect? So we talked about translations and content reduction and being able to find content and reuse it or reduce errors. But what happened that you didn't expect that's been a real satisfaction in your organizations?
Well, one thing we saw that was a bit of a surprise is, you know, as Todd or Andy mentioned, you know, when you're getting reuse, you know that it's always right everywhere. We had occasions on which it can equally be always wrong everywhere. You know, if your base item that you're reusing many times is wrong, you would think that would be a horrible thing, but it turns out one of the surprises for me was that it turns out to be very useful, because no matter where the error is reported, you know, it might be in a Hungarian deliverable or something, wherever the error is reported, you're able to go back to the content management system and pull the thread and find out all the where used data and immediately track all the places, all the deliverables, how long has it been, and find where your error went and go fix it everywhere in a very controlled environment that we never had in our WYSIWYG systems. That was a surprise.
That's interesting. That's one I didn't expect. Definitely wouldn't have expected that. Were there disappointments? You know, there are areas you thought you'd get a benefit and did not?
Yeah, I guess for us, I was disappointed with, and I'm not going to name tools here or anything, but some of the technologies just seem to be, they're slower than you expect. Some of the performance of the systems as you get them in place, and whether it's the way we tricked them out or just the system we chose or whatever, haven't always been fast enough to keep up. And so, like for us, it's like we really expected to get a huge productivity savings on the writer's perspective, but really the system we've got in place right now, it takes about the same amount of time to write a book as it did before. And that's not because we haven't got productivity savings. It's because the system itself is slow at certain points. So it's like before we had the great big road that went around the cities and got you north of the cities, but you had to drive around the cities. Well, now we've got the road that we cut right through the center, but there's a whole bunch of stoplights on it, so the writers have to stop quite frequently and wait for the system to do things. And we're at a spot where we're trying to break those stoplights down and start enhancing those performance enhancements. But it's been a big frustration for us and our writers that here this system that we thought was going to just hum along and give us all this great benefit from a productivity standpoint really has taken a lot of work to get productivity out of it.
This is Todd. I completely concur on that too. This is me nodding up and down my head as Andrew's talking. Performance is something you really got to put a lot of effort into up front, more than we thought. Having those requirements nailed down, understanding that we had a number of issues, that created bumps along the road that we overcame. But over time, it took time to get that done. Getting all of the vendors that we had in our project working and rowing in the same direction at the same time was a much bigger challenge too. So those are things to watch out for.
Well, great. Thanks for that input. I know we're coming close to the close of the top of the hour and about the end of the session. So I'd like to wrap up with just a summary. Today we heard quite a bit about the true ROI of XML. We heard about content reuse and translation and the ability to do more with less resources, and more control over the content so errors are corrected easily or avoided altogether. Automation. The authors focusing on writing and not having to worry about maintaining just an entire book, but allowing themselves to work on the content and share that information across the organization. The ability to provide customized output effortlessly, right? So we avoid the typesetting. And that the single source of content supporting multiple outputs. I want to thank our panelists for today and to you, the audience, for your questions and for interest in attending. Just a moment about single sourcing solutions. We have over a decade experience in dynamic product information delivery, content creation, and publication. We're experts in every phase of the single source development process. We have deep community relationships to ensure your success and to foster information exchange, such as we did here with this webinar. We're uniquely focused on our customers. We offer concierge level service through an advisory line that you talk directly to a concierge who can help you direct your challenge to the right person. We offer blogs, podcasts, webinars, and even typos in code repositories. For more detail, please visit the link at the bottom of that page. And again, I want to thank our panelists. If you'd like more details, and if you're not convinced or are you confused and you want more information, please reach out to us. Our phone number is listed on the web screen. You can also contact us via email at info@singlesourcing.com or just visit our website at www.single-sourcing.com. Again, thank you to the panelists, Charlotte, Greg, Todd, and Andrew. Appreciate your time today and facilitating and helping the audience understand the true benefits and ROI that can be had through XML solutions. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
David.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.